Tiger nears completion on the Henschel assembly line in Kassel in June 1943. World War II tank driver Werner Bloch relives his experience on the front line to Jonathan Trigg and shares how after the war he came face to face with the type of tank that saved him. The Tiger was a Panzer, long in gestation. The Wehrmacht began the war in 1939 with an armor doctrine that emphasized speed, surprise, and communication to shock the enemy and shatter their ability to resist. However, experience in the Western campaign in 1940 against heavy tanks, such as the French Char B1 and the British Matilda II, convinced the Germans they needed a bigger tank of their own with more firepower. Two armament firms, Porsche and Henschel, were asked to come up with designs for this new tank, to be ready for combat by Hitler's birthday. On April 20th, 1942, Henschel's model was selected and the Tiger was born. Although it was actually Ferdinand Porsche who gave it its now infamous nickname, the officially titled Panzer Kampfwagen V was a monster. Weighing twice as much as a Panzer for a medium tank, its frontal armor was 120 millimeters thick and even thicker on the gun mantlet, making it impervious to almost anything the Allies could field. It was its gun, however, that made it a tank killer par excellence, derived from the much-feared AT-8 flak gun. The 8.8 centimeters KWK-36L 56 was capable of destroying any other tank in service at the time, up to a range of 1.5 miles, 2.5 kilometers, and most beyond even that. As driver Werner Bloch saw firsthand, we had great armor, thick armor, and a magnificent gun. I think it was the best German gun of the war. We could smash the enemy up from a long way away, but they had to get close to hurt us. The Tiger wasn't perfect, however. Firstly, it was hugely expensive and time-consuming to manufacture. A single Tiger costs as much as 4 Sturmgeschütz's 3 assault guns, and with the Reich short of both raw materials and labor, its numbers were always going to be limited. Secondly, it had mechanical problems. Over-engineered and rushed into service, it was prone to break down. And it used prodigious amounts of fuel the Third Reich simply didn't have. This Tiger was destined for the Battle of Kursk, a Tiger in Russia in 1943. Werner recounts. The Tiger was so heavy, too heavy. It was 57 tons. Even the ammunition was heavy. Each of the 92 rounds weighed 20 pounds, making a total ammunition load of 3/4 of a ton. So we used so much gasoline. And they weren't reliable, you see. So many problems. If we tried to drive them for long distances, they would break down. The gearbox, the suspension, where the tracks would go, especially the tracks. Each track link was 125 pounds. When they broke, you had to replace them. You had to be strong. At the front, that meant, if the Russians were attacking, you'd have to abandon the Panzer and blow it up, and we never wanted to do that. But there was no denying the fear and dread it instilled in those who had to face it on the battlefield, or the affection and faith it engendered in those who crewed it, one of whom was Werner Bloch, Werner's story, the commander. Standing upright in the turret was a favorite target for Red Army snipers. Werner Bloch, in his retirement home, aged 93 in 2019, born in Hamburg in 1925. Werner was the youngest of 4 children in a household dominated by an abusive and drunken father. Leaving school aged 14, he went to work like so many others at the giant Blohm and Voss shipyard in the city, where the Kriegsmarine's burgeoning U-boat fleet was built. The same year that he left school, he joined the Hitler Youth membership, had been compulsory for all German boys since the end of 1936. I enjoyed the Hitler Youth. We learned to march. We sang lots of songs, and they prepared us for war. And that's where I became fascinated with the Waffen-SS. Werner was desperate to leave home. His father would return from drinking sprees and beat him and his siblings. And to escape the misery, Werner too would find comfort in alcohol. In November 1942, he decided to volunteer for the Waffen-SS. I was just 17 when I volunteered, so my father had to give permission and sign my enlistment papers. He said no, he didn't want me to join, especially the Waffen-SS. But I pleaded with him. Papa, if I wait to be called up, I'll be sent to the infantry, which everyone knows is very dangerous. I want to join the Waffen-SS Panzers. In the end, he said yes. I was so pleased. At the recruitment office, he handed in his papers, duly signed, and went through the standard medical. After all that, I only just got in. You had to be a minimum of 5'7" and tall to be accepted, and I was 5'7" and just, so that was that. I was in. Tiger training. The training was hard. But I knew it would be. I'd volunteered after all. So what did I expect? Recounted Werner. Even with his experience in the Hitler Youth, Werner found military discipline difficult at first. Back in Hamburg, I had a job, money in my pocket, and some freedom to do what I wanted to do. But suddenly all that was totally gone, and it was do this, do that. It was hard. Training also left a mark on him in another way. He rolled up his left shirt sleeve to reveal a faded blue letter A tattoo. They gave us this so they didn't waste time if we were wounded and needed a blood transfusion. They could just look at our arm and then go ahead, and it could save our lives. Before the war, the Reich lagged behind the likes of Great Britain and the United States in embracing motorization, so car ownership was still for the few. Having learnt to drive in the shipyard, Werner was selected to become a panzer driver. It was a vital role, as the decorated Panzer Commander Horst Riebenstahl made clear. The skills of the driver were of huge importance. Quite often, the fate of the entire crew depended upon his skills. Initially sent to Paderborn, Werner first drove old Panzer Is. You had to have a special license to drive a Tiger. It was so difficult, and you had to have a lot of training. There were 50 of us drivers getting trained in Paderborn, and they picked 5 of us, just 5 to become Tiger drivers. Everyone else went to other Panzers. Baptism of fire, Kursk once qualified. Werner was sent east to Russia, just in time for the Wehrmacht's summer offensive, Operation Citadel. Having suffered a calamitous defeat at Stalingrad during the winter, Hitler was determined to regain the initiative and win a famous victory by capturing the city of Kursk and annihilating the Soviet armies defending it. Having learnt to drive in the shipyard, Werner was selected to become a panzer driver having massed 750,000 men, 10,000 guns and mortars, and almost 3,000 panzers and assault guns. On the morning of July 5, 1943, the Germans launched their attack. Some 147 Tigers were on the battlefield, which was just a small minority of the total number of panzers involved, with many of them concentrated in the Waffen-SS divisions in the southern pincer of the offensive. Under the overall command of Erich von Manstein, Werner was driving one of them. We nicknamed him Leo, and I used to kiss him every morning for luck, he said. Kursk was hell on earth for the young 17-year-old. Early on in the battle, we were driving across the steppe and I had my hatch open. My commander was out of the turret sitting on the deck behind me. I couldn't hear much because of the noise of the engine, but then I could feel something dripping on my head, down the side of my neck, and it kept on dripping. I tried to wipe it with my hand. It was blood. My commander had been shot. The Russians were always trying to kill panzer commanders, you see, and a sniper must have seen him and shot him. He should have been under cover in the turret. But even then, a commander had to expose his head, and usually his upper body, so he could see what was going on. Fighting their way forward through some of the most extensive defenses ever built, German casualties grew. What was intended by Nazi high command to be a swift battle of movement became an attritional slogging match between the two opponents, Werner recalled. Kursk was terrible. There were so many Russians. We were advancing and I couldn't see much as my hatch was closed. Then I could see I was driving over bodies, dead bodies, and they were ours. They were German soldiers. They'd been killed in the fighting. I don't know how. Maybe by artillery, and there I was. Driving my Tiger over them as they lay there, I tried to block it out of my mind as I thought about the tracks grinding them. Up. Tigers from the SS Totenkopf division moved forward into position. For the Kursk offensive, the Tiger would perform well, but the offensive still failed. Driving past wrecked and burning panzers was just as bad. The rancid smell of burning flesh was everywhere, and it was dreadful to hear the screams of men burning to death in their panzers. After a week, with over 50,000 dead and several hundred panzers destroyed, Hitler called Citadel off. It would be Nazi Germany's last major offensive in the East, backed by huge reserves. The Red Army then launched its own counteroffensives in the south, forcing the Germans to send most of their remaining armored troops, including Werner's Tiger, south to Ukraine. There, he and his crew were teamed up with one of the premier Waffen-SS divisions. We fought with the Wiking, one of the oldest divisions in the Waffen-SS, and one of the toughest they never cracked. Leo was then involved in a series of desperate battles to stem the Soviet advance. We were usually told to sit on ridges, or on hills, in a line you see, and shoot the Russians as they were advancing because we could hit them a long way away. But getting up onto the hills wasn't easy. We had problems with the clutch, so we used to reverse up the hills with the gun hanging backwards. And then when we reached the top, we turned around and pointed our gun back at the Russians. We used to fight T-34s mostly. The T-34 was a very powerful tank, vicious, much faster than the Tiger. I think it was better designed than the Tiger. The T-34 had a big advantage too, as it was diesel. And the Tiger was petrol, so we used to catch fire. But the T-34 didn't. There were always so many of them. I think our Tiger destroyed 34 T-34s in total. German losses were also high. We were in action once in Ukraine, and I had my hatch open. I shouldn't have. But the inside of the Tiger was like a furnace. A shell landed close to us, very close, and my commander's head literally landed on my lap as I was sitting there. It had been blown clean off. His eyes were still open and looking at me, straight at me. It was horrible, just horrible. Losses would have been higher had it not been for Leo. Leo saved me so many times, saved all of us. The front armor was so strong, you see. Shells would hit us and bounce off. It was like a miracle. We were hit 27 times by enemy rounds. When a round hit, the noise inside the Tiger was incredible. It was a huge sound, like a bell being struck, and the whole Tiger would shake, and we would scream in fear. That's why the Russians always tried to get behind us, or to the sides, so they could shoot at the armor on the side, or the engine at the back. If they did that, they could kill a Tiger, but not from the front. The end of Leo and the Warby, the spring of 1945. Werner was a 19-year-old NCO with an Iron Cross and still driving Leo as the Allies closed in on Berlin. We ran out of ammunition, and then we ran out of fuel. Had to leave Leo, but we couldn't leave him intact. All we had left were a couple of stick grenades. My commander, Untersturm for 2nd Lieutenant Muller, gave me the order, and I dropped them into Leo's turret. I felt so bad. I loved Leo so much. The Panzerkampfwagen VI Tiger I produced, August 1942, August 1944 number, built 1,347 weight, 54 to 57 tons length, 8.45 meters width, 3.45 meters, height, 3.00 meters range, road 121 miles, cross-country 68 miles crew, 5 armor, 25 to 120 millimeters armament, 8 centimeters, KWK 36L, 56 plus 2x 7.92 millimeters MG-34 machine guns. The crew split up, and Werner began the long walk home. I was only half a day from Hamburg when I came to a farm and asked the farmer if I could sleep in his barn. He said yes, but turned me in. I was woken up by some Americans who offered me a cigarette before beating me up. Sent to Hampshire as a POW, he was set to work driving a 25-ton Caterpillar farm vehicle. Everyone else found it hard to handle, but it was no trouble for me. After you've driven a Tiger, you can drive anything. Werner met an English girl, and they married and settled in Sheffield. On Armistice Day 1954, Werner, now a British citizen, visited the Imperial War Museum, London. He stopped dead in his tracks at the sight of an exhibit. I became emotional. I couldn't help it. Leo had saved my life so many times, and there he was. I stepped over the rope and walked over to him. A policeman came over as he thought I was going to damage it or put a bomb under it. I don't know, but I said, no, don't worry. I'm going to kiss it like I used to kiss Leo. Kiss the Panzer that saved my life over and over. The SS committed horrific crimes, some of the worst in history, but Werner insists he did nothing to be ashamed of. I was just a soldier. I was never a Nazi. In Russia, I used to drive through the villages and towns and never fire a shot or destroy anything. Werner admits memories of the fighting in Russia have never left him. Some nights I can't sleep, even now, and I just lie there and remember.